the little bit of a report or analysis that we've done in terms of non-athletic student code of conduct information, and really tied into our clubs and activities that don't fall under MHSA guidelines. So, Mr. Johnson?
And Dr. Gray, Mr. Becker, and you asked me to put together kind of explanation of how we handle our current clubs at Brighton High School. Currently, we have about 45 active clubs participating. We have a bunch. I brought all my files over of all my current ones and all my ones that have kind of sunsetted. They kind of died off. But probably our three most successful things we do at Brighton High School, if you look at our organized groups, they're Project Unified, mountain biking, and robotics. And those are all clubs. There's a lot of work involved in overseeing those, volunteering for them, and so they are a very important part of our school. I'm the current supervisor, didn't ask to be, but when I started many years ago, I loved clubs. I love when kids get involved. They don't get cut. There's no fee for it. They just get involved in something that they love and they love to come to school for. So I took this on several years ago. Actually, robotics started with a $5,000 grant from First Robotics, I think 8 years ago. I don't even know how to plug in a light, let alone run a robotics team, but that's how it started. Mountain biking started 8 years ago too, because I like to ride a bike. So all of these clubs that we have now just come in literally daily. Kids come to me with an idea. The kids today want to start a hacky sack club. I outlawed it. I outlawed it because the kids were getting crazy over it and you didn't want to see it, but they want to start a hacky sack club after school. I said, great. All you need is a supervisor. You need to fill out one of my club application forms. You have to have an adult supervisor. Almost all of them are current teachers. And then Mr. Stahl, actually, his daughter, filled one out last year and started a new club, Project Wildlife. I don't say no to anybody. I say yes to every club that comes forward. So we have a lot of clubs. The good thing about it is I would supervise them all. I just kind of organize it all. We have great parent volunteers and staff volunteers that do all the work. Many of you have been involved in clubs. You know, you see all the parent volunteers out there doing it for free. Very, very few of our clubs are supported financially by the school. Almost all of them are supported solely by the participants and the parents. The parents give hundreds of thousands of hours to some of these clubs, and in some cases, thousands of their own dollars. Our mountain biking coaches, for example, are nationally certified and safety certified. So I can go on and on about it, but the big thing I want to explain to you is that the variety of clubs we have. One is Green Group, for example. They collect bottles on Fridays for us. They do our returnables program. One is robotics, which takes hours of technical skills and labor after school. So the huge variety of clubs makes it really impossible to have one code of conduct that covers every team like MHSAA's athletics does. There is no state organization that oversees clubs. And I don't say no to any of them. I can go on and on about the list, but if you go on our website, they're all listed on our website. Esports, mountain biking, Project Wildlife, Science Olympiad, Young Life, swing dancing. I want kids involved. I don't care what they're involved in, how they're involved in something. So that's why our clubs are so popular in high school. But they're so very different. It's impossible to put them under one single little umbrella. Almost all of our groups I mentioned are not funded by the school. They're all run by volunteer parents or staff members. Clubs have a changing roster week to week. I can't tell you who's showing up at swing dance this week. I can just tell you that kids are showing up, they're having a blast with each other, and then they're going downtown and doing swing dance routines. Many clubs have participants from other schools and other levels. For example, mountain biking has middle schoolers. Our newest club is brand new, just starting competition Wednesday night, is our girls hockey team. We have a Livingston United girls hockey team. There are girls from all over the county on that team. You want to know why they came to Brighton High School to be under our umbrella? Because we like those things. And if you talk to Mr. Fowler, I can give you his email address, he'll tell you Brighton High School supports clubs, and they love clubs. He came to us, we got it hammered through, we took care of it, he's got a little paperwork done, he's got physicals for the girls, and they start to play this Wednesday night. So clubs come to Brighton High School because they know we embrace them. All club participants follow our student handbook code of conduct, so if they break rules, they get suspended, just like any other kid. If they're on a club event and they get in a fight, they get suspended through our handbook, just like our handbook code, any other thing. I would say that all of these clubs also have outside, not all of them, but many of them have outside organizations. Robotics has FIRST, mountain biking has MISCA and NICA. I can go through and tell you what they're all affiliated with, but there's too many of them. If you didn't know, Model U1 this weekend is one of our clubs. They had over 1,000 participants at the high school this last weekend if you drove by. That was Model U1. That's a student-led, free club that kids do not get cut from. Club advisors and teams are responsible for creation of their own rules and policies as well. So for example, if you're a member of the mountain biking team and you don't come to several practices, those coaches sit you. Each team has to have their own thing. Unfortunately, if you don't show up to pick up bottles on a Friday, Green Group doesn't sit you the next Friday. They let you come pick up bottles. So what I'm trying to say is they're all so diverse and so varying in what they do, it's hard to have one set of rules for all of them. But we have a club application, it comes through my office, we do the paperwork, and then I help monitor and supervise the clubs as they go through their year. There is no MHSAA to help us with that either. It's just us organizing it and supervising it. As I mentioned, the goal of clubs is to find students at home, get them involved. All the research says you get a kid involved, get them come to school, it's going to keep them there and have them do well. We are being extremely successful in finding kids' homes right now, finding kids' homes and clubs. Several of our clubs have over 100 participants. They're our biggest teams. Nobody has ever contacted me to say, Mr. Johnson, do this differently. We don't like what you're doing here with clubs. I mean, they thank me for just supervising and allowing their kids participation. So no one's asking me to create a set rule. I follow the student handbook, the code of conduct. That's what I do, and it's been working great. So I've never had one concern or complaint come my way. So my recommendation is this. Continue to allow me to run the clubs like I've been doing, supervise them and giving all my time and doing them the way I've been doing them. Some of you are members of clubs, you know how successful they are. I have 0% to do with how good robotics was last year. But I organize the paperwork and keep it rolling so they can go do that stuff, and our parents can volunteer, and our coaches can volunteer their time. So my recommendation, Dr. Gray asked me to make a recommendation, would be not to change it. I don't want to recreate the wheel that's already running perfectly. I think I'm doing a fine job supervising it and getting kids involved. And Hacky Sack wants to start tomorrow, and Ryan Kane's probably going to fall off his chair over there. But it's going to be organized after school, it's going to be run by a staff supervisor, it's going to be in a room with a meeting time, and it's going to be organized weekly. So that's my presentation, Dr. Gray. I think that's most of what you asked me to present. I'll be glad to take questions. I can give you my club application form if you'd like. You can go on the website, look under the student, and see under the list on the current clubs. We are still updating that roster, like weekly, and we're getting a new club week, so it's a lot of fun. Any questions?
Do you, just a rough idea, Mr. Johnson, of what percentage of kids are involved in at least one club? Do you know?
The older they get, obviously more involved. I'd say probably every one of those kids is involved in at least one club. Raise your hand if you're not. So every one of those kids, but they're older and they're involved kids. Dr. says, I don't have that number. I would say it's a lot of time.
Okay.
And we have, esports, and like I said, something for everybody. It's pretty cool.
So my understanding of the process, just to make sure, is that there is an application you have to fill out to begin. All right, and all students, there's wide variance in the types of clubs.
Totally.
So, I mean, so the governing rules would be difficult besides the student handbook. And all students in all clubs at all times are bound by the student handbook.
You said it better than I could, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And like I said, Green Group, if they get in trouble, they'll make them set up 3 weeks of picking up recyclable bottles. It's hard to manage different groups for different, because some are competing clubs, some are just community service organizations. We have several that are service-based or community service-based clubs that just give back to the school. We have one called Light that goes down to the elementaries and does free tutoring after school. A variety of clubs are just pretty cool ways for kids to get involved.
So I want to clarify, because I don't think what our initial request was directed towards changing clubs.
Okay.
I believe that our clubs are very well run, and we have a lot of opportunities and continue to grow those opportunities, which is fantastic. I think the request was to look at, if we're going to hold a set of students or a set of our population to a certain standard, then we should be doing that across the board to make sure that we have equity in how we're managing our students. And it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that if a student athlete is out on a Friday night at a friend's house and consumes alcohol, that they won't be penalized under the student code of conduct, but they would be penalized under the other set of standards that they've signed and agreed to upon. Whereas if that same student was a band member they wouldn't be hit with student code of conduct because it's off of campus property, and they wouldn't have any ramifications or accountability based on the fact that they aren't held to the same standards as a student athlete.
I think band and choir are a little different because they're co-curricular. They participate during the day, they practice during the day, and at night they do those performances based on their practice during the day. So it's a little different. But club advisors, like my new girls hockey team, they intend to take their kids, if they get in trouble like that, to follow MHSAA guidelines and use athletic punishments just like that. They have chosen that set of policies because they're very similar. Green group or bite, a student on bite, first of all, we don't know who their roster is, they're not on a playing field, we don't know where they're at. If a student on bite gets caught on social media smoking a vape, it's hard, I don't have a roster active that changes daily. I do not have the time to manage those rosters across the board. There's no possible way I can manage 50 clubs and do my job. We have to get a student activities director that some schools do. They could do that job. But I could not do that under my current requirements. And I don't think that they match up. So if someone from Bite gets caught or seen on vaping, do I say that you can't go to Horning and tutor for a month? They don't have contests to lose. They don't get punishments because there's not athletic contests. And don't forget, the athletics are under MHSAA guidelines as well. And so there's a large governing force in Lansing with hundreds of employees and hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in it to help oversee these programs, whereas clubs are just wide open.
Well, we're still, but I mean, to that point, and by no means, I don't think anybody up here on this board has an expectation that you're responsible for managing, the behaviors of every single kid in a club activity. That's not realistic. The point is the equity across the board and what we're holding our students to from a standard perspective. And certainly on the athletic side, and this isn't, my whole point is we're not trying to pick on one group versus another, but we also don't want to be holding one set of our student population to a set of standards that another set of the student population doesn't have to abide by. That creates a significant gap in equity and can be significantly problematic if, and then to further that, we've got a potential double jeopardy too. So not only is the student athlete held accountable for the student code of conduct, but they're also held accountable to the student athlete, which is.
I think we kind of agree. It's just apples to oranges in my understanding because clubs are so diverse. Again, like Project Unify, we have fifth-year seniors there. Students that come back to school for their fifth year. They're not even athletically eligible. Those are different standards for those kids. So I would hate to, some of those students don't receive normal grading procedures. So in terms of, there's also eligibility based on academics and athletics from the MHSAA and from the Brighton Athletic Handbook. I don't have those in place for my clubs. It's just too much work to manage. Mr. Vecchione tried to assist Scranton 10 years ago. He said it's impossible. But I see what you're saying. You want equity and standards and a code of handbook. I could copy the athletic handbook and give it to my club coaches. But again,
here's my perspective, and I'm not looking for an answer here tonight. And this isn't about. I'm one board member of 7. I still believe we have a gap. I think that's my personal opinion on this. I think we can do better, and I think we should do better. Obviously, the rest of the board would, they have as much of a voice as I do, but I think we can do a lot better than where we're at today in that space.
On that is anything we can do to tighten it up where it's fair, and again for everyone. Let's just say, for instance, this crisis of the vape bite thing. We're working on certain things within the city and different things. I think that's really what the board's kind of discussion is about. What can we do to make it fair and balanced amongst the students, but to also help our students that would benefit from guidelines within the clubs. It's not overburden staff, overburden. It's more, what can we learn? What can we share that will benefit all the students in Brighton area schools? And not to overburden any professional or any student, just to make it correct. I mean, we're looking for a safe and secure as best as we can and use the abilities and what we're all learning. So it transfers to them as well. Maybe, and a fair balance would be, well, maybe those standards may keep some of the high standards keep people on the right track. If they had the same high standards over here, it would help them stay in the right track. And again, I think that's just the thought process that I was carrying with it. And again, I'm extremely pleased with the clubs. You know, every day I see them doing things, and it's wonderful. And be a part of it. I think that's what I was thinking. I think it's similar to what I heard on the board.
In my current 8 years, 8+ years of doing it, I haven't run into any circumstances where a club athlete or participant or has gotten in trouble and we haven't dealt with it. I don't remember anything coming my way. Maybe that's because I'm not instructing those people to watch for that. But I can tell you that, like, my mountain biking coach will come to me. I heard this kid struggling in grades. You know, he will bring it to my attention, and that's what will happen. I'm doing my best with it. I'm willing to try to look at some fair and balanced standards, but I don't know how I can oversee all of them with the changing rosters of 45 diverse clubs.
Well, what I would suggest, what I would offer up too is
One of the board members.
how can we help support you? And that's as much of this as well. This isn't a burden of, hey, this is all on your shoulders or Henry's shoulders or Dr. Gray's shoulders. This is what do you need from us to support making this happen and give you the resources that are required to do these types of things.
They're called student activities directors, and they are visible in other school districts. We kind of got rid of all those things about 6 or 7 years ago.
Or before you got here.
Yeah, right.
No, I'd go back to what Andy mentioned earlier, because I thought this originally came from when it was brought to us to, I think, as a board to endorse MHSA rules and conduct, code of conduct there, is when it came to us for approval. I think that's when this sparked the interest of the club groups, and whether they're club athletic or just clubs, as you speak of, that's when it came, I think, apparent, at least with myself, and I think probably some of the other board members, is that maybe there is this double side that if you're an athlete, because I think what actually happened was, and it was probably maybe spring sports or summer or fall sports, when all the athletes had to go in the gym, they all signed a piece of paper, whatever, that says they adhere, their parents do, or something to that nature, to the rules. And that's where I think this is where the start was the fact, okay, well, the band members, I think, do something similar, but then it goes back to where they're teaching during the day, which football isn't, or something of that nature. But again, the whole idea of having 2 separate classes of students receiving different punishments, if that's the case, compared to a standard type punishment across the board.
In my career, MHSAA has, a specific set of requirement standards, academic standards, and so those rules have come from that organization. Right. There's not a like organization for us. They're so diverse, so changing by the day.
But again, I don't think that we asked for you to come up and give us a synopsis of the different groups and how they're handling things. I thought it was more along the lines that someone was going to go back and try to adapt some type of rules or something similar to the clubs like they have for the athletes.
Okay, and I can do that very simply. I can go to the athletic handbook and adapt their rules and guidelines, but I'm telling you, I don't think I can manage the numbers. But I can come up with some like rules.
How many of the clubs are sports-related clubs, like mountain biking, like the women's hockey?
Bass fishing. There's bass fishing, mountain biking, ice hockey, field hockey. 25, 30% of them. A lot of them are community service.
So would it be? So those clubs certainly have more in common with high school sports than does, say, like bike.
Could I classify them that way? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Is that within reason that they, because they're kind of in an equivalence class to high school sports?
Yeah, like we have figure skating too. I can classify some that are more athletic, but again, that's not equity and fair across the board.
And I don't want that to be construed, that's the thing, I'm not looking at this, again, speaking as one member of the board here, but it's not I don't want to see this be a athlete versus non-athlete. I think it's that the bottom line is how do we create equity across the board so that our students are being held accountable for their actions, whether they're a chess player or a hockey player or a band member or part of the performing arts. It's broad, and I certainly understand and completely respect the fact that we can't put a square peg in a round hole. But how do we get creative and looking at this strategically so that we are making sure that we're thinking about it from an equity standpoint, and we are creating an environment where we're looking out for the best interests of our kids too. And that if you make bad decisions or poor decisions or poor choices, there's consequences for that. Not trying to exclude kids out of being active and being participatory and all the things we want them to do, but there are standards that everyone's held to.
If I could, I think I may have a slightly different opinion on maybe where we need to go next. As I listen to Mr. Johnson talk about this, it sounds to me like from what he sees in organizing the clubs, there isn't a gap that needs to be filled. And the other thing that I'm hearing is that there is such a diversity of the types of organizations and the types of students and the types of activities and involvement. It's going to be really hard to come up with one policy that fits all of them. And I am concerned that if we rush to just apply the MHSAA standards to all of the social groups that are involved at the school, that those clubs are now held to a standard, an academic performance standard, for example. So you're saying a student that is struggling academically is no longer allowed to take part in the social clubs? I mean, that is not necessarily in the best interest of the students, and I would like for us to take more time, or at least to let our administrators take more time to think about whether there are gaps that they see that need to be filled, because I understand the desire for equity and to ensure that students that have chosen to be in sports programs aren't held to an unfair standard. But I don't know that you address that by then creating new standards for vastly different types of organizations and student involvement, and creating extra layers of rules that we're asking our parent volunteers and our teacher volunteers to deal with for clubs that have a very different purpose than a sports team or even a sports club. So I don't think that, I think there's, if we are serious about adding to the student code of conduct for clubs, I think we need a lot more time to think about what we really need and what different shapes that should take to meet the goal. Because at the moment, if we were just talking about taking the sports conduct and handing it to the clubs, I think we might be going farther than we need to.
Yeah, I don't think it's applicable. It's not definitely not one size fits all. I completely agree.
And I think just to follow up, I mean, I agree with Alicia's comments, and I think, one of the things we can't lose sight of is the fact that, when we all strive, and I think we all have the common goal to have equity and fairness across the board. However, that ultimately takes shape and is effectuated. The problem is that one of the practical problems beyond the limited time that Mr. Johnson had to try to implement and supervise whatever set of policies and regulations that the board might try to ultimately adopt is, you have to understand too that, I think we cited this, that in the club level, these are all parent volunteers that are running all of these things. They're privately funded, and when you contrast that to the athletic side, it's all of the regulations and policies are driven by MHSAA guidelines. We all have paid coaches in all of those positions. So there's a very regimented structure that exists and has existed for a long time. And I think it would be very difficult to essentially try to fit a square peg in a round hole by grafting those regulations and policies that have been in effect for a long time to the club situation that ultimately might have the effect of, beyond taxing Mr. Johnson's time, it might have the ultimate effect of driving a lot of these clubs away, because these are parent volunteers. They're not there to police, and while obviously they want to set a good example for all of their club members, I think it would be very, very difficult from a practical standpoint to impose that burden on that whole group. And quite frankly, to the extent that some of these students are more at risk for engaging in that type of behavior, it's almost counterproductive if you're then taking away a club that might be a productive diversion for that at-risk student by not letting them participate in it because they engage in the at-risk activity. So, I mean, I think there are a lot of issues that really need to be explored before we dive into trying to graft these regulations. That's my concern as well. So.
Well, I don't think anything was asked to come up with a solution tonight. In fact, if anything, I think this was originally vetted probably 2 or 3 months, maybe 4 months ago. I think it was at the beginning of the school year when this was actually, when we started discussing this, and now it's, November. So I don't think anybody's asking to, that you come up with a solution tonight, or that we hurry up and adopt these rules for the clubs by any means. I would like, again, as Alicia mentioned, to take time and try and develop it the right way, but to not let it fall to the wayside either, and to continue to try to get something where, again, you come back with maybe some kind of ideas or something that would possibly maybe benefit the majority of the people, or the majority of the kids.
I'll work on some options. I don't think I'll change my recommendation if we don't change it on current.
Well, and again, I don't know why it's falling on your shoulders either, Gavin, to be honest with you. Maybe because you're in charge of the clubs or something. I don't know, or the principal, but it
Anybody runs
seems
the
like
school,
there's...
it's just piece of cake, right, Gavin? It's Superman.
Again, just 20 years in Brighton schools, this is not bragging, but I would recommend we don't do something to recreate the wheel. It's very successful. These clubs are growing in our schools. They're very successful. We're not having issues with discipline. These are great volunteers. We don't want to offend and ask for more of their time. My recommendations, I did come tonight with a recommendation not do anything different. That was my recommendation before I go and create options for you and spend more time on it. My recommendation is to not do something different. But I will go and look at options for you.
Gavin, possibly just a letter of intent when they sign up in the club for Brighton area schools that we intend to follow. It doesn't need to do it, and the student then knows the student handbook applies if they're involved in school activities. It could be that simple, just an intent letter maybe to be made aware, and then again, maybe they wrote in the student handbook before and what the responsibilities are, because I think that's what it's about, is teaching responsibility, and not at all. I believe everybody's invited. Here supports that, so it wouldn't be anything that would make it students wouldn't do the best thing they got going in school.
It is.
I know that for these kids. I mean, again, in that situation, so I support. Again, whoever brings more kids to clubs.
I could look at some options, develop a letter of intent, bring it back, let you look at them, and then we can talk about options.
I think there's a couple of points made here by a few people. Co-curricular, they try out, they agree to the rules, and they sign accordingly. Many of the kids that don't make it into those co-curriculum classes end up in a club of some kind, where it's much easier for them again. They don't have to try out, they need to show up, and they have to show good intent. And administrative rules were brought up here of the people that are in charge. I believe we leave it in his hands. He's made his recommendation. He said, don't change it. It's not broken. Don't fix it. I agree with that. You may very well task people who are already putting a lot of their time and effort into these clubs. Yet another thing that they have to do, and usually when you set up a whole set of rules, there's also a lot of checks and balances that has to be done. Now these organizations, who by the will of a good heart and a bunch of kids that want something to do, is now tasked too hard and won't be able to perform at the level that they were doing prior to that. So again, leave it to our administrators. administrators in this, let's not micromanage this from this desk. And let's let this thing go. I see us trying to micromanage something because one or two people brought it up. That's my.
So I'm gonna take exception with a couple of things, because I don't think this is micromanaging, I think this is policy. I think this is looking at this from an organizational perspective of equity. And I by no means want to get in the weeds on this, and I don't think it's Mr. Johnson's responsibility to solve this issue. I simply believe this is something that we can look at more strategically. I've heard, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Johnson or Dr. Gray, that our co-curriculars are not being held to the same standards as the student athlete either. So I think we've got three layers here. We've got student athlete being held to a set of standards. We've got co-curriculars who are held to the student code of conduct, but not the same level of responsibility of the student athlete. And then we've got clubs. I'm hearing three different groups. Is that correct?
I would say
More
4.
level is that some coaches,
I would say 4.
some coaches give more punishment than the athletic handbook.
So I would say MHSA. I would agree with you on that. I'd say co-curricular. I would say athletic clubs, and I'd say service clubs. Those would be the 4 organizations that I would say. And so MHSA is clearly defined. We get that.
Yeah.
Co-curricular falls under our student handbook. Clearly defined. We get that. In terms of the athletic, like the hockey club or the mountain biking club, I would say the consequences for when we see a kid on social media doing something dumb closely mimic what we do with MHSA or the Code of Handbook. The one that's the most difficult that I think Gavin or all of us would have trouble writing are those social or service-oriented clubs, which we reach out to the at-risk kids to try to get them involved in something, as Mr. Myers was saying, and how do we manage that? That'll be our work. That'll be the work we have to do, because the other 3 we can do easily. That's not a problem, but we'll take some time then and take a look at that 4th layer, because that's the one I think is going to be the most difficult for us to come up with a fair but equal type of comparison. It's not going to be, but we can come up with something in relation to that, or stick with what we're doing presently and more solidly define the other 3, or even chunk them into categories. We could do that.
And Ken, just, I mean, certainly we can agree to disagree, and that's fine. To me, though, it's about accountability and holding our kids to a set of standards that the expectation would be across the board. And I guess all it's.
I guess I liken it to a group of Brighton students, and this happens all the time, that decides to join a church-related basketball club. And they're all our kids, and they're all out there representing Brighton kids out there playing against someone else. Are we going to regulate them? It's not even done on our grounds. I happen to be included in one of these groups that would probably be, what's your last category called again?
Service.
Service. Which is what we're doing. We're looking at wildlife in general, not necessarily on the buildings and the properties of the schools. So I look, and I'd like to ask a question, reaching higher, would that be considered a club, or is that part of our academics? What is reaching higher?
It's kind of co-curricular. To some extent.
Now, many times you end up with students that are there because they participated in some of these negative things. I wouldn't want to affect that in any way, shape, or form, because it's actually a great way for them to get involved and work through these problems. I could give you some examples that I can't mention up here, but I'm part of some of those. And it could be detrimental if it's not, if it's pushed to the end.
So it's okay if they participate and do that in a group then?
I'm sorry, say again?
It's okay if they participate and do it in a group then?
I don't understand what you mean.
That's my point, I mean.
They go do something that's against our school handbook.
Yeah.
If they're in that group, you're saying they're given permission to do that.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying some of them end up there because they had something happen, and we're trying to help them through it, or give them support. So that's a little different.
Which I would agree, so, and as long as things don't progress, whether in the group, everything's fine. But if they do, then I don't think they should just be able to skate as well.
Well, I don't think so either, but I think, I'm gonna see how this thing falls through, because I don't know how you regulate that. How do you do it without putting a negative?
Again, the 4th category would be the most difficult category, by far, to define, just because, there's no contests, there's none of those structured type activities. And so let us take a look at that. I think we beat this to death tonight, and we'll come back and maybe even at a workshop or something. This could be a good discussion. So,
Sounds good.
thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
And we have student representatives, and just I don't know if you want to talk again, Gabby, because you did a great job tonight. I don't think we probably need to. I'm just assuming, but I would just like to say, great presentation. Every time you get up or in front of people, you amaze me. So I just really appreciate it. It's going to be sad at the end of the year when you're done, but the boys you have at your age and that, it's astounding to me. So great job.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for the board again for allowing me to do that presentation. I know for a lot of members throughout our community, it's a very impactful week, and it's really amazing that Brighton can come together and raise over $45,000 in just 1 week. That's like 2 weeks into school. So it's not like we had a ton of time to prepare, and like with the help of my leadership class and members, businesses, and it's really amazing. And I just want to say thank you, and thank you to everyone who came to be recognized today. You all did an amazing job. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So that takes us out of superintendent report and into board action. Item A, special meeting minutes of October 17th, 2018. Do we have a motion to approve?
Support.
I think you had it. Now you're fighting. All right. Motion by Mr. Stahl, supported by Mr. Myers. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 7-0. Item B, regular meeting minutes of October 22nd, 2018. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Chesley, supported by Mr. Stahl. Any discussion?
I have one comment. I think we may have misspelled our student representative's name. Mr. Myers, did you catch that?
I did catch it. But the star she has enough on her plate that picking this one her name, but that's okay. My name is misspelled quite a bit as well, an extra E there at the beginning. In fact, I think at the front, the vestibule, it says,
You didn't notice that?
oh, I did.
We'll switch that.
You better read that correctly.
Oh, it's all right.
Tonight now.
It's fine.
No, you Okay. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? And
Abstaining.
then 2 abstentions. Myself. So 5-0-2. All right, item C, hiring of certified staff. Dr. Gray.
Yeah, we recommend that you approve these 3 hires tonight. The grade 4 teacher at Hawkins, Elizabeth Schmidt, has been in the position since the beginning of the year as a full-time sub. We're ready to move forward with the solidification of those numbers to hiring her at BA Step 1. We're recommending Karina Miller, who was a candidate earlier in the year, for the multi job that opened when we had another teacher leave us earlier this year. And Eric Howe is a grade 4 teacher at Spencer Elementary, replacing a full-time sub that we had that also had to leave us. This is new for us. I don't know, talking to other superintendents across the state and our county, I think this might be the sign of the times to come, unfortunately, in terms of continually hiring, but it's strange. It makes me nervous for the future. In terms of teaching positions and posting and not getting applicants in some specific type positions. So we've put some calls out to some of the people that we know in terms of programming to continue to try to bolster some of those. We are very happy with these particular candidates. We did get good coverage in these, and we recommend them enthusiastically.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Ms. Reed, supported by Dr. Chesney. Any discussion?
Dr. Gray, what is the circumstance that has changed significantly?
We're seeing a teacher shortage.
Okay,
So about 9 years, 10 years ago, there was a lot of pieces that changed in terms of the profession, from the retirement system to certifications to programming. And one of our fears was down the road, we were going to see a shortage, especially in some of the critical areas. And I know a nearby district friend of mine didn't get an applicant for a PE job, not one. Special education obviously is difficult to fill. Some of the upper level math, sciences are difficult to fill, not only because of the programming, but a lot of people can take that type of degree and go make 2 or 3 times as much as they head out of college. So we're not going to sit around and complain about it. We're in touch with the universities and the programming to see if we can get more interest and change some of those dynamics in terms of that. But I do have a fear for the next 5 to 7 years, until the pendulum swings again, that you're going to see some of the shortages in some of the areas. Luckily, we have an attractive district. We have an attractive contract in terms of starting. We worked on that a year or so ago, and so I think that's helped us in some of these situations. I know of districts all around, all the way to the west side of the state, that have jobs filled right now with emergency certs and non-qualified. That's a challenge. So, but again, that doesn't reflect on these 3 candidates. These are 3 great candidates, and we recommend them enthusiastically.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 7-0. That'll close for action, and move us into for future action. Item A, donation first Lego. Dr. Gray.
We'll recommend in a couple weeks that you accept a donation of $1,000 from D.E. McNabb with appreciation to our first Lego. If you recall, first Lego is kind of the first leg, no pun intended, in terms of the first robotics type situation at our elementaries. Ties in nicely to our makerspace and STEAM centers that we have at the elementary media centers presently, and transitions up through what they're doing at Maltby and Scranton, and obviously to our high school team. Since we've developed this program, we've seen more and more interest. This is just another one of those examples of interest at the lower level as those programs develop.
So I have a question, Dr. Gray. So the first LEGO program that's being implemented across the board at the lower elementary levels, when we get a donation like this, is there a specific method of allocation, or is it just a general fund that's...
We get both, typically. We'll get one that donates to Hilton, or we'll get one that donates to Hornet, or we'll get one that donates to the program.
So this is just a general to the program? Is that right?
Yeah, this one's more general. That's why there isn't a school actually listed on this.
Any other questions? Item B, school of choice, second semester. Dr. Gray.
As we typically do, we'll recommend a limited offering of school of choice in grades 1 through 12 as we go through into the second semester. So we typically talk about this, and I have a presentation coming up in November or December about where we sit this year, because we're pretty much through our audit in terms of our pupil accounting. We sit at about 16% school of choice across the board in terms of the district, and we're managing that pretty well. This is for limited, so the difference would be when we recommend typically unlimited in the late spring as we head towards summer, the dynamic changes because you take a larger portion of people. We typically do that because as we head into the fall, our funding is split in a 90-10% ratio, with 90% of our funding coming in the September or first week of October, fourth Wednesday count, 10% coming in the February second, fourth Wednesday count. The reason we do limited is because we don't look to add any overloads, any imbalances, any of those types of situations that cost us money. Because if you think of a student in our district generating $8,000, let's take an easy number, in terms of per pupil funding for a full FTE, then 10% is only $800. If we have an overload of $750, what was the point of doing it at that point? So we primarily only take limited the second semester. We take a very few in terms of that, and we backfill open positions that don't get us anywhere near an overload, hoping that that particular student might stay for the fall count as well. That's why we recommend this. You won't see kindergarten on here. We're really, really balanced, really, really well at the kindergarten level. So to open it at that level doesn't make any sense to us. Plus, the difference with limited versus unlimited, there's only a couple of delineating factors that would preclude a kid or exclude a kid from coming in under school of choice, say a suspension or something like that. For limited, you can put it for a grade, let's say grade 3, you only have to take 1. You can take 1,000, but you only have to take 1. That allows us to balance it. We just put them in order, and that's how we move from there.
Questions? Thank you.
Didn't we run into a debate on this last time for school of choice?
Not on the limited. We typically talk a little more about unlimited, and rightfully so. I agree with the conversation on unlimited because, again, our recommendation will always be to keep it at 20% or below. Preferably where we've been hanging at the 15 to 16% range has been pretty manageable for us. That puts us at about 1,000 and then 5,000 in-district kids. Allows us to balance those out pretty well. Even when you look by grade, which I'll give you the breakdown in terms of the sheet, pretty manageable in terms of that.
So is the board consensus? Does anybody have any questions before we vote on this the next time we meet? Good with it? You've got some concerns, so
If you have concerns, give me a call.
good. All right. Thank you.
Item C, Neola policy, first reading.
So I have Dr. Turner here for Neola policy guidelines. You've received your information, received your cheat sheet in terms of this. This is the second volume, volume 32 from last February as we push these out. He's spent a great deal of time in terms of vetting these in terms of how it looks for his department and the manageability of it. My suggestion, and I talked to Ms. Reed a little earlier tonight about it, would be if you have questions, call him directly on specific policy questions. If there's a how we propose these, that's something we need to talk about too. And we're in contact with Neola to see if we can have it manipulate the document, because I know what you want to see in terms of redlining that. I just can't get their document to do it because it's a protected document. So the next time I have Dr. Halleck in, or even before, I'd like to meet with, if Ms. Reed would enjoy that, and anybody else, and I know she would because we've talked about it a dozen times, or anybody else, we've been peppering them pretty good. We've been peppering Neola pretty good, and they're a great company, so this isn't a disparagement, but peppering them pretty good, and we have to have the ability to present this in a way that the board wants to see it, that makes sense. And so I know they're working on it. Companies, though, giving up control of the document is difficult. So
Just consistent with that, I mean, I look at page 37 on this, and there's some check marks and some squiggle lines, and it's particularly unclear what we're even voting on. And
have
that's
you run into any of those specifics?
I dog-eared about 13 pages that are of the same form that I really don't even know what we're voting on.
Okay.
And I know some of our other Neola policies recently have been a little bit easier to understand. These ones, I mean, I'm just looking at the first page of it, and I started to find the extra gray here because I couldn't figure out what we have today and what we are adding or subtracting, and it's.
Let me do this. I'll go with Dr. Turner, and we'll write our own cheat sheet that explains each page. And then you'll have you'll have a summative of each page so you could read it. And then if you have clarifying questions after the summative, we can go beyond that. If you want to talk about the formatting, I think that's a different conversation. So if you have specifics before the next meeting, let's wait till the end of this week. I'll have Dr. Turner shoot it out Friday through me to you in terms of what each page kind of represents with a little cheat sheet, and then the formatting thing I'll set up a separate meeting.
So besides the formatting, could we have just an overall summary of what the policy changes are? Is there a big sweeping, or is it all individual policies that we need to get into the details of?
Tonight or by Friday?
No. I'm just saying. I'm just in general asking the question of is there large sweeping substantive changes that are made, or are they all, is it all in the details?
It's primarily.
To me, and I completely agree with what's being said, it would be, what would be most helpful, and this is just not specific to this one, but all of them, would be an executive summary highlighting what's the changes, what's the major change, what's the context, and then bullet point out, these are the things that are changing.
So we send you that. It's from Neola. It's a yellow sheet. So the yellow sheet actually goes policy by policy and gives you a paragraph. You just received one from Star 2 days ago. And it wasn't for this one, it was for a different set. It's coming up to give you enough time to review. But that's their executive summary. Now, it's written by Neola, it's written by policy, it's written by attorneys, no offense. But what I suggest is if there's more confusion, maybe we can tweak it a little bit in terms of, not layman's terms, but board policy terms. Chris and I will talk about that tomorrow and then see what we can do. I think he did it one other time, but the last one we got from Neola, I mean, they literally go paragraph by paragraph in relation to each particular thing, but we get it. So we'll do that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else? Okay, item D, JROTC program.
That's not. I can tell you what we've done so far. We've sent you the surveys that you asked for in terms of 2 different types. One survey was a singular junior ROTC survey, and one was a combination survey from what we took in terms of the notes and adding other languages and stuff too. So hopefully you've had the time to review those particular surveys. Ms. Mosher created those. But after that, we just kind of are waiting for direction.
One question I had on that, Dr. Grady, when was the superintendent council meeting that, to assess the interest from the consortium?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that. You know, most people like their programs, and they run a large enough program that they don't need to do a consortium, at least the one in our county. So we might be able to send kids, but we'd only send kids for a portion of our FTE during the day. So what you're going to have to decide is if they have open seats, which presently they fill them beyond 100, so I don't see them other than if they have a tight section allowing for that to happen, and you'd have to have a shared school of choice piece because it doesn't presently fall under the consortium piece. It's something that we've talked about possibly looking at, but it's not a CTE program. So it wouldn't fall under the LATEC programming either. So there'd have to be a new type of a consortium.
Was there any interest, I mean, obviously, Howell has their own program, but all of the other...
Yeah, I think they're just kind of taking it in for now. And there's only one, it's just Howell in terms of that. So I don't know if they're going to see that as more of a competition than a consortium type thing or not so far.
So far, Roger, another thing I think tonight that we need to do is decide on if we're going to survey multiple topics or if we're going to survey just the junior ROTC. Because I think that Ms. Moyer did a good job putting together 2 options. So we kind of give them direction. And Dr. Chesney had his opinion on what he'd like to see on there, so I guess we could maybe give a consensus for administration report on the survey. So my opinion is to use the survey specifically for junior ROTC and not blend it because it was presented, we had presenters here, the board knows the full impact of what we're attempting to do, so if students are interested. We add other things to it. I don't disagree with adding other things and having other options at all, but it wasn't kind of looked at and it wasn't presented the same way. In timing issue, we're prepared to send that survey out and we'll know if we're going to do something for next year and be underway. And that could happen in the other ideas that are there also. I mean, we still do the same thing and send it out, but that's my position. So what's the rest of the board think?
Clearly, I think that while we have the opportunity to gather data, we should gather as much data as we possibly can. And if we have this opportunity and we are sending out a survey, I mean, just realistically to see what the interest is in foreign languages, and particularly in world languages and computer science counting as a world language. I mean, to have have the ability to gather all kinds of data, I think we should take advantage of that. And frankly, it also puts in perspective that saying yes to some programs means by necessity that you might have to say no to other programs. And I think having a survey that gathers all the data brings that point to the forefront in the data that we're gathering.
I guess I would have liked to have seen some presentations or something, just so we had an idea of what the idea of moving forward would be with some type of foreign languages or something of that nature. Just to, I guess, get a better understanding of it and that kind of thing moving forward.
I don't know, from my perspective at least, I don't know that that precludes us from asking our parents and residents and other folks what they might be interested in. Because I think Dr. Chesney raises a good point that asking what you would like to see happen at Brighton is not we can't have everything. We might want everything, but we can't always have everything all at the same time. So certainly.
So if we're going to go that far, are there other topics over and above than just language that we should be asking?
I got a whole
That's
bunch.
a good question.
I got a whole bunch. I support all that. I will stick to what we originally were talking about. We raised the junior ROTC. We had a full board colonel come in to present. He presented on the facts. He has over 100 years of stability in our nation. It represents the types of programs that we want to offer. Now, we have an annual survey that goes out. We're still doing an annual survey, correct, Dr. Gray?
NCA satisfaction.
Yeah, so in that survey, you could put in there what do you want to see.
We can't.
Can't do that.
No, that survey is on a 5-year cycle with our NCA visit. That survey has to remain static each year because that's how when we meet with them, that's how we show trends one way or the other. So if we change the survey in the 5-year period, that skews our data and we get dinged on our final visit. Now you can do a separate survey in terms of that, like what we're talking about. But the NCA survey wouldn't work for that.
Okay, well, in this situation, maybe we do another survey, and maybe every 90 days or every 6 months, because things change, the wheel turns, and I think that school actually looking at that, it's not like we can make a photocopy now and say we're going to use that lesson for 10 years. It's changing too quickly. So in this case, we've had solid interest from, I think, the board interested in looking at seeing if the district's interested in this program. I say we need to run it and let it go and do the survey and see what the input is on it. And again, Dr. Chesney, I still support your idea of having other options and different things, but I don't support combining this one. I support letting this one go and launching it. And I don't think it'll hurt to do another one and you can have a list of things to add to it. And I do agree with if the parents of the district would like to have those things that are on the survey that you suggest, I would like to see them added as well. But again, it's a lot of, it'll be the first time we've ever done that before. Have we ever done a curriculum survey and sent it out like this?
You know, we don't ask like this, so typically in our NCA survey, we get feedback because there is a portion of the NCA survey that talks about the academics, what people would like to see or what they like and what they don't like. And so a lot of the reason that we have expanded foreign language options, including some coding and including some MVS options like Mandarin and that online, is from the NCA surveys. So typically, we pull those NCA surveys, we categorize the results, and then we meet as an administrative team and try to build that into either the strategic plan that we have in place and categories within that, or we create a new piece in terms of our own business plans as we head into the next year. So a lot of those things that you see that have evolved come directly from that survey, and really the open-ended response. So if all of a sudden we get 50 people in the open-ended response talking about coding, obviously that's or ROTC or whatever, that's significant enough that we're going to take a look at that program.
Is that, so just a follow-up question to that, is that how, I remember there was a presentation about the forensic class,
Yeah.
and there's an indication that there was a lot of interest that had been expressed. How was that gleaned? Was it through the survey, or did the open?
Portion of it come through the survey, the other we do a curriculum fair each year, typically at the high school, where we have a curriculum book this big, but we only probably offer that much of it each year just because of the mathematical problem of this many classes, this many kids. So when we run the kids through and do a student-led schedule as opposed to a district-led schedule, that's what creates the changes in our scheduling for each year, and that's how we balance our scheduling throughout the year. So forensic all of a sudden showed up on the survey, but not only on the survey, but it showed up as a science-related course that could take the place of one of your 4 that you can now take to qualify for your Michigan Merit Curriculum graduation requirements. So that's how that one rose to prominence too. The other reason we see something rise to prominence is because of the particular instructor. It's no lucky thing that all of a sudden we have 2 full 6-hour periods full of psychology because you have Ms. Davis, Mr. Grabowski teaching it. And that's how some of those ebb and flow as well, based on particular staff members.
What does the survey look like? Is it email?
You get it every year. We send out an email and we leave it open for about 4 or 5 weeks. We send it out a couple different times. You click on it. There are some check this box type situations, and those are fine because we trend data that. Well, we stay pretty static in terms of our data, but then there's open-ended questions. So we survey our students, we survey our staff, and we survey our parents. Those are the 3 different ones we do.
Can it be presented to the students as you just mentioned somebody else like that? Is that
So
still on for this year?
again, what we typically do is we have open-ended questions on what you like, what you don't like, or what you'd like to see in terms of that. And so we glean those types of results from those open-ended responses. I'm going to tell you right now, if I put something in there saying, would you like ROTC, you're going to get enough people that submit it. If I put them in there, would you like Mandarin Chinese, you're going to get enough people to do it. That's why we leave them open-ended, because we want a true interest as opposed to a forced interest. I think anytime you ask if somebody likes something, you're going to get a skewed response. At least that's what I was taught in all my classes throughout. If you ask somebody if they don't like something, you're going to get the exact same. You're already setting up the answer you're going to get. So our suggestion, again, is when you look at a curricular survey or something like that, you could almost do a listing of types of things, or an open-ended type thing with ideas in relation to it that might prompt a more statistically significant response. That's how we run them when we run reports or dissertations or those types of things. Otherwise, you don't have a true alpha level of statistical significance.
I'm sorry, I'll end it right here. So I like what you said about a true list, because I think you also have a lot of kids that wouldn't have a clue what a JROTC program is unless you gave them something there. At least they could see it unless they go, what's this?
So again, I think the way to push programming, if this board would like a particular programming, I'd go about it a different way. So I would call kids in and we would explain the programming. We would show the benefits. We would identify where it fits in their schedule. We would do all those things through, again, like the curriculum committee as well, and can join those so that we know it's going to be successful in terms, because we can make any program successful if we have enough time and manage it. And that's, I think any of these programs could be successful, but I think the comment earlier too about no matter what program starts, another one ends. That happens as well. So we're up for any of these. We just need to look at the ideas and move forward.
I believe that would be one of the fears, is that the 4-year junior ROTC program would then eliminate another program, and I think that's the pushback potentially from some people in management or administration. But I don't think it's been out there fairly depicted or fairly announced to students and parents, and I believe that because this is such an important thing, that, this is going to go not from students necessarily, this could be from our middle school or our grade school parents, knowing that it's available when they get to middle school and then high school, and then giving their children guidance and saying, is this something you guys are interested in? So I think it's a little more far-reaching, and I believe that it's adequate use of our resources to send the survey and send it on its own and let it go. And then if the board members want to do something else, and I'll stand here, I guess, until I get the yes or no answer out of it. But I think we should tonight decide if we send the survey or we don't send the survey. And if we don't send the survey, then you suffer from that informing your district, and then you're going to send me to school after you get off the board, and they got to stand around handing out flyers and too much. So anyway, I think we should send the survey. I I'd like to do a board consensus, starting with Mr. Tron.
Yeah.
Hold on, I asked for consensus, so Mr. Tron. Head forward, it's okay. You're good with it? Mr. Myers?
I'm good with the survey. I think there are some tweaks that need to be made to the survey.
Like
And-
what?
Well, I think, for example, I think there's ways that we can, while and I realize that the genesis of the desire to have this survey stemmed from the JROTC presentation, and that can still be the direction of the questions. I don't think it has to be mutually exclusive to the questions regarding some of the other potential curriculum options. So for example, the one alternative survey that we had directly had questions relating to other world language, Arabic, Mandarin, Chinese, and then in the JROTC survey, there was a question of, I would enroll in JROTC instead of another elective, and then in parentheses, world language. What I would suggest is to say, have a question, I would enroll in JROTC instead of another elective. If they answer yes, then that's fine. If they say no, then you drop down and say, I would prefer to, and then you give them the option of, we can then give information about whether they'd be interested in, Mandarin, Chinese, or Arabic. Right. So you still have the questions that we're looking for in the draft survey, but we don't at the same time exclude the option for those people who see that there is another route or another way to express their interest in these other potential options of curriculum. So I think if there's a way we can call it a hybrid survey, we might be able to accomplish both objectives. That would be my suggestion.
Giving indication, and that I don't have a problem with. What I don't want to do, though, is take away from the 4-year intensity of a program like this that has long-reaching things going back from 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, all the way through the senior year in high school. This is a serious undertaking. It could be, again, Howell's program sitting at 150 Air Force cadets right now. So it makes sense to me, we're similar size to Howell schools, you would take 800 kids, 800 students. So it makes sense to me to give the parents the choice and the students. These young adults that are here tonight can make their choice and bring it home to their parents if that's what they want to do. So, and I do support Dr. Cho's vision on different ideas. I certainly support the coding and language opportunity if that's the student's desire. So that's a lot to throw on there. You might get another 100 requests as well, which I'm also good with. Go through curriculum to see what things they can do. And some come in, like you said, some stay, and some will change. In our curriculum guide right now, there's a lot of stuff we don't do. It happens every year. Right. So I'm supportive of all that system. I think it works, and I think it's a little different that we may be doing this from the board level, but sometimes, and I believe board members are responsible to do that, they believe that's the vision the district should have. And like I've shared with you in the past, we've done this as a board together, and some of the stuff I have not totally on my own initially. I heard some results tonight on things we did on our own. It does work, and I suggest that all board members use their gifts to do the same in their expertise. Should benefit the students. So as I continue down the list, I think, Roger, you have some great ideas on that, and I'm supportive of that as well. So, but I think we need to get it rolling, and again, we know the time frame in order to produce this program in 6 months once we say go. And it's not a simple thing to do. And the only way the Brighton area schools is going to do it is it's done professionally. And you heard the colonel, it's the only way he's going to do it, because that's what he does. He can handle 15,000 troops, he can sure handle equipment into the program that's successful. Was it his number, 15,000? Is that the way I took care of it? No, I can't remember, 15,000, but he's now responsible for the state of Michigan to be partnered with an operation like that. I think it's a home run. So Roger, I would support your idea of an adjusted survey, and then how's the rest of the board feel about that?
I think that while we have this opportunity to gather data, we should gather data, as much data as possible.
Is there anything else anybody else wants on it?
I think, well, related to that, I think that that's a legitimate question, and I also think that, as of January 1st, there's going to be 2 new board members, and giving them the opportunity to put some data and some programs of theirs.
That might be for next year. That could be next year's.
We talk about how it takes a long time for programs to get implemented, and so getting the 2 new board members of January 1st might be a good
I think
approach.
Dr. Chesney totally squashed the idea. I know what you're doing. So let's get it going with the board here. So far we have 2 in consensus. How do you feel, President?
I think a couple of thoughts. One, certainly with the ROTC program, I think it's important in the survey, and Dr. Gray, you touched on it from a statistical standpoint. The way we frame questions is incredibly important for the success of what we're doing. And what I'm fearful of is that if we don't do this wisely, we will run into problems on multiple fronts. One, we'll not get good data, most importantly. 2, we will have, we'll set ourselves or put ourselves in a position where people are survey fatigued. So if we're not going to, if we're going to look at doing multiple surveys, we're already setting ourselves up for potential failure, I believe.
I wasn't at one.
So, and
In all fairness,
understand. So I think we need to be cautious of not getting survey fatigue. If we're going to do a survey, we need to do the survey the right way. I believe that with ROTC, we need to be asking some direct questions also on what the commitment of the program is. So people understand the questions they're asking. If they're interested in ROTC, just like coding or any other, then this is what the commitment is. So if I check yes on ROTC, then under that, it's a layer of commitments that I would have to make in order to participate in this program. That's my general feedback. And then lastly, and I'm not looking for an answer, Ms. Mosier or Dr. Gray, but I'm asking a question just, if you could open up programs today, how many would they be? What would they be?
And my answer would be whichever ones the kids want. That would be my answer.
my answer would be which ones the parents and the kids want, because the parents are in charge as well as the kids. The kids are not in charge. The 5th grader is not in charge.
No, I'm saying at the high school level.
I'm just working with you.
Yeah.
High school, that's a little different.
And that's what I think we're talking about right now. We're talking about high school level programming and an option for that. I know my kids come home and ask me about the curriculum guide when we sit down. So when I say what the kids want, it includes the parents, obviously. It includes the family, because they're not going to make that decision. And even our best students sitting in the audience tonight probably don't fill out all their classes by themselves typically. So I think that's the ones we offer. I mean, we're a student-centered schedule. That means what the students want through their parents in relation to what we offer sets them up for the programming that they're going to take when they go off to college. And really for us, our responsibility is to create options. So not every kid in 10th grade knows what they're going to do at the collegiate level. So we try to give lots of different options for them so that they can be successful. And ROTC could be one of those. Coding could be another one. And we've seen that with forensics. We've seen it with the dozens of different classes we've added over the last 10 years.
I think we need to remember this. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. I'm an elected board member, and I'm asking to do this. I'm down to the next one. Alicia. I have 3 in consensus. I need 1 more.
I agree that we should go forward with a survey, but I don't think that either of the surveys we've seen so far are quite what we need to get the data that's really going to be useful on this.
Can you help them get that?
Well, no, because I don't design surveys very well. I ask my children what they want. That doesn't go over real well. So what I cannot provide that expertise, but I would love to see what our administration could come up with on another pass. I do agree that we should go forward with this now and then consider what additional surveys we'd like to do later next year, not in January, but later. Because I agree with Mr. Burchfield. If we send out another one in January or February, we probably wouldn't get the best response. But something that we can get out before the
just want to question the clarity then, so I don't waste Ms. Mosier's time. So in terms of the survey itself, the two that we gave you, one is item specific in terms of JROTC, and that's not what you're looking for us to do. The other one was a combination of language and JROTC, and that's not exactly what you want us to do. So what I'm hearing though, in terms of the consensus, is a JROTC option, maybe even a listing of particular classes that we've talked about, and then drop downs if they select. So if they select JROTC, there has to be some kind of a summative after that. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Birchfield? So if you, by selecting JROTC, what you're committing to is something along these lines, and then you have a general description of that particular program.
To me, I believe it's important if we're going to ask a question. One, we have to Ms. Reed's point, the design of surveys is an art. And if you're going to get good data, you've got to design it.
All I need is the phone numbers. Call them all. Call every parent in the district. There's only 6,000. I'll take a survey. I'll do it.
I'm good with the survey.
People have to understand what the commitment, to me, a yes or no, if we just ask yes or no without the recognition of what the commitment is, then we're not getting a true understanding of whether or not somebody's going to have the wherewithal to withstand the program.
I trust.
So
I
again,
trust
So again, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to have, here are the different classes we're thinking about expanding our curriculum to. JROTC, here's the paragraph that describes JROTC. Mandarin Chinese, here's the paragraph that describes that. Arabic, coding, whatever.
Japanese.
Yeah, and so I need a list, I guess, of what people would like to see. I have an idea, but then they'll select those, and then we'll have to take the next step in terms of, once we have a number, then we'll contact the individual groups, and then we can move from there. Yeah.
Mr. President, since my consensus is that we did have.
I'm still coming back.
Okay, my question is are we certain that that the JROTC program, like the Mandarin, the Chinese and all that, is creditable?
It is.
Okay.
So I did my checking on that, and what you can do in terms of that is you can count it as an elective credit. So an elective credit would be one of the 6 beyond the 18 that you have mandated by the state for the 24 that you need for the Michigan Merit High School diploma.
Thank you. Mr. John? So you're going to go back and redesign the survey again, is that correct?
I think that's what I'm hearing.
And here's the reason why I'm asking this question. So then it's going to come back in front of the board again, and then if the board is not happy with the way that survey reads or something, then are we going to change it again? Because I could have thought the last direction we gave you was fairly specific as to what the survey and how the survey was going to read when it went out.
And that's why you have both of those in the packet, because that's the 2 different things that we heard at the board meeting when we looked at our minutes. So what we heard was one faction of the board that wanted a singular junior ROTC survey, and another faction of the board that wanted a combined survey in terms of that. That's why you received 2 surveys in the email. It's not our responsibility to create the consensus for the board. We take direction from the consensus, and so if we have consensus to do the survey with a paragraph, we can write that easily and send that out. And I wouldn't think it would have to come back, but I'd have to have direction and consensus.
So all I'm asking then is if you get direction tonight to create another survey or to tweak these surveys, is it going to come back to the board again at the next board meeting for us to say we like it or we don't like it?
If we have clarity on one, we can do it easily.
Because I don't know why we waited 2 weeks on these other surveys to make that decision tonight.
Well,
I sent both surveys.
I got it.
The direction I have is to bring them to tonight. That's all I'm saying.
I support one survey, but I'm willing to compromise, and Roger Myers put it most eloquently, and he kind of combined it. I would support the junior ROTC survey, and the very bottom do and drop in and work as other things on the list. And by the way, but I would hold pretty firm. I believe we have a situation here. We have a total difference of opinion, Dr. Chesney and I. I'm sitting here just reading the whole Constitution book here. I think a lot of our students got the same one. So I don't hear anything in what he's offering right now that solidifies the foundation of our country's values. I'm all good with the other stuff. I'm good with the options. As you know, since the day we've been in this business together, I've always supported offering every possible class to students. If we don't offer it, it can be offered at the college level or outside of school. This is a different situation. This is a totally different, this is a moral, ethical situation to decide if this community wants to do this or not. It's not totally up to us, it's really up to them. And as we present this, and you take a little heart in this, this is an obligation if it's what this community wants. Now, whether or not your family has done what your family's done, I know my family's done. And I can tell you what, no question, I'm doing right now what they want me to do. So I feel very passionate this is the right avenue. Right now, we have 4 consensus. Mr. Stahl, where are you at?
Right there in the consensus with the alternative, Mr. Meyer and Mr. Birchfield.
So then I would
It
suggest
wouldn't be just straight across the road.
falling back on Mr. Trombley. Mr. Trombley's situation is absolutely, he's totally correct. So to complete this tonight, then maybe we need to make the consensus that we take the ROTC as the primary, drop the other stuff in because it wasn't really looked at seriously here. We didn't have discussion. We didn't have anything he would present. We don't know what's involved in it. We know what's involved in ROTC. We know it's $200,000 for this. It's going to be $100,000 for that. But I'll say the same thing I said when you were doing the general fund dream a little bit when it came to how we added our raises and everything else. This shouldn't be about the money. It should be about it's what the students and parents want in their school district. From there, you'll have to find the money. So that's my position. So it sounds like we have a consensus. We can get everybody to agree that we go formally with the ROTC at the top. We drop on the bottom and put down, I don't care if it's a list of 10 things. The Mandarin Chinese is not going to change and support the Constitution of the United States of America. What we're talking about right now supports the Constitution of this country.
I don't want to get into a debate tonight about the U.S. Constitution and.
I won't.
Well, that's not the purpose of tonight's meeting.
No, it is a purpose. Because this is something that elected officials brought to this board, and I wanted that to be.
And we're discussing a program. We're not talking about the U.S. Constitution.
We
So
are offering this program.
We're going to move off of that piece, and we're going to focus on the survey. The survey specifically, we don't want to steer the data at the end of the day. I think what I'm hearing a consensus amongst this board that there is a desire to continue to look at a survey, design a survey that's encompassing of ROTC as well as other programs.
Let's do it right
that
now.
the administration.
Do you have a copy of it?
I don't.
Let's pull that survey out and do it right now. We have time. Let's do it.
We're not going to use a board meeting to develop a survey.
Are you sure?
Right. Positive.
Let me ask the board. Mr. Trombley.
What?
Can we use the time to do a survey?
I'd rather have someone that, and again, let me go back to my original statement. I thought this survey was already completed from the last board meeting, and the direction was given on how to complete the survey, and then it was going to come to us. And then it was going to move forward. And so far, I haven't seen that in that way, because it's not moving forward right now.
But it can. So we have consensus of 4.
Why don't we send out both surveys?
5. Send them, okay. Fire them.
What I'm hearing again, what I'm hearing as a consensus is there's a desire to continue working on a survey that encompasses ROTC as well as other programs, making sure that we're setting the data up to ask the right questions in a survey format, and that we'll let the administration develop that survey on the programming that they that they believe is important to the asking the community of interest. Am I summarizing that accurately, or am I missing something?
If you can put some time parameters on it.
Do we have to revisit it? Can't we just say what you just said? I could put it in their hands and do it.
I thought that's what was being done.
So what realistically, Dr. Gray, what's a realistic time frame for doing that? Or
Ms.
Dr.
Mosier is looking at me panically.
Well, because I'm a little bit confused on what you're looking for. So I'm not, seriously, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. So the survey, one of the surveys in there has 3 different options with paragraphs that explains the different programming. So when you talk about paragraphs, I'm slightly confused there. And then it does say only if interested, you would finish this part of the survey. So I guess I'm looking for what other programs you're looking for and more explanation.
What I believe this board is asking is to develop a survey with the expertise that you can get your hands on. None of us up here are experts in designing a survey. So if that's in-house, then use in-house. If that's going out-of-house, go out-of-house. Develop a survey that's going to ask the questions in a meaningful way with programming that you believe would be important to ask this community.
So here's what I would say. So the combo survey that we already sent you probably fits that because it clearly identifies junior ROTC. It clearly identifies the languages. It has the paragraphs like we talked about tonight. That's why I talked about that model because we already wrote it. My suggestion is go back and read those, take a look at those surveys again, and I think you'll get a good idea in terms of especially the combo survey. So the first survey is strictly ROTC. And Ms. Mosher's right. We put in there, if you check interest, drop down to the next area. Here's the explanation. And then we go from there. So if the consensus is to send out a survey that has multiple items on that, I'd say we're done. I'd say we send it out, and we get our results, and we can go from there, and we can tell you what we get back. If you want something different, that's why we're questioning the clarity in terms of we don't know exactly what you want. Even when we go around, there's 4 or 5 different things we're hearing. So it's hard for us to write a survey to meet the needs of 4 or 5 different opinions.
So let me, can I go back? So I go back to what I said. I agree that what was emailed to us, and I do have a copy. I brought a copy of both of them with me tonight. And I do agree that the 2 versions are reflective of a couple of different camps that were presented at the last meeting. I think that, and I go back to the fact that I don't think these need to be mutually exclusive. I do believe we need to have one survey. The JROTC survey has a very nice introductory executive summary that indicates that the district is exploring this as an option. It has the drop-down links, which you indicated, Dr. Gray, if anyone wants to choose more option or more information about each one of those programs. What I would suggest then, when you meld these together, is there's also an introductory paragraph for the other survey. Right, and then because the other one starts out with saying Brighton Area Schools is exploring the interest of possible course offerings at the secondary level, and it goes in to explain that. I would put those together and just
make one.
Right, you have the JROTC introductory paragraph, and then you can say at the same time, the district is also exploring interest from the community and the students regarding these other options and blah, blah, blah. So it's,
I don't think it's
I don't think it's going to be that difficult. I'm happy to help.
Thank you, Mr. Myers.
Apparently you are, John.
I don't know about that, but.
As an attorney. But here's what happened, is that you weren't here when this all went down. And, Dr. Chesney waited on pretty thick about adding these other things in there. He is incorrect in his methods. I'm just saying that. So I'll go ahead and support the idea that we should have those things on there. I don't have a problem with it. But the problem I have with it is that it wasn't really, it was just thrown in there, this is what we're going to do, we should just pilot it, which then diluted the survey. But in this situation, we follow Attorney Meyer's recommendation. He's done a lot of things in this court. And this is kind of a little court, we're a legal entity here as we're operating together. Let's just run the survey that Mr. Mosher put together and run it.
Okay, so one more question of clarity. So we're going to meld these 2 surveys together, and we're just going to send it out. So I'm not going to bring it back, not going to send it to you.
It's going to go by Wednesday, right?
We're going to try.
That'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll do it as fast as we can, but with fidelity. We want it to be done well.
And what's the response time?
Typically, we leave at least 2 weeks open for a survey, at least. So, again, I'm going to question clarity. How many weeks do you want me to leave it open?
I would go 2 sounds good to me, and I would be very careful with the holiday break coming up because that's going to create problems.
So I'll probably actually leave it 3 then, so that, because nobody's going to do it over Thanksgiving. But we could send a reminder email after Thanksgiving, so we'll do it the week.
fine.
maybe even 2 weeks after.
I'd also like them to put it in the Friday letter, surveys coming.
Yeah, and what we typically do, Mr. Connolly, is
John is fine.
I put a link on there. So we'll send it out via the schools that we want to send it out from, and then in my Friday letter, I replicate that paragraph and create a link.
So then.
It makes me feel good that you think anybody reads my Friday letter,
I think it's pretty good.
so makes me feel pretty good about myself.
It's good. But I'd like to also make sure that we get this to the middle school as well.
Yeah, we plan on 7-12.
Secondary specific.
7-12.
How about this and six? No.
Well, I'm gonna question clarity again. Our idea is 7-12.
Okay.
If you'd like us to do 5-12, then I'd like
Well,
directed to
voting,
do 5-12.
voting issue that Dr. Chesney brings up, which is very important, and he brought up this language issue. I think it sets a tempo because, again, they're planning early. The planning starts early. We don't plan instantly. I'm good to start with this.
They're not taking foreign language in 5th and 6th grade, and I don't think the program goes down to
Other
5th and 6th
countries,
grade.
other countries teach English in the 5th grade and every student learns it. So,
No, I'm not talking English. I'm talking the credit classes like the Mandarin, Chinese.
I'm talking about what other countries are doing in foreign language and teaching. I've had people from Germany, every single one of them learned English in the 5th grade.
So I would have concern going that low, and the reason being is that it's very difficult for a 5th and 6th grade family to decide what the outcomes are gonna be at the high school level when you have more choices. So you're gonna say, hey, do this, and then later on, when more options are available, you might not have good data that's gonna actually show you and be valid. So with 7 and 8, you probably have a better chance, right, because they're getting more involved in those things. So I would encourage you to stay with the 7 and 8.
But when they get to 7 and 8, if they hadn't known about it prior, they wouldn't know to make the choice. So I'd still say earlier is better, but maybe 6th grade. Okay, so let's start with 7 and 8 in the high school.
7-12.
7 through 12, right.
Bridge as well.
Absolutely good.
Okay.
I would also like to point out that we would keep the survey open, but to keep it valid, you're gonna want at least 20% and 60% of your students to take it, and of course, be valid anyway, so we have to keep it open to make sure it's valid.
So how are the students going to know to take the survey?
We'll push it out. The normal means that we push out any form.
Was that like a Twitter, like the Twitter?
I don't tweet, but I'm sure I could convince somebody in the audience to tweet it out for me. Gabby would tweet it. Who has the most followers in the audience? Ryan?
I run the Brighton High School Rough and Rowdy Twitter.
Can you get that out there?
Leah, can you tweet it for him, please? Appreciate that.
In 2020, there's 4 seats. Could you sign up and you can?
No. Ryan is my boss, that wouldn't work.
All right. So, Mr. Brighton, we're giving direction to Dr. Gray to combine those 2 surveys, put it out for 7 to 12, and launch it. We don't have to revisit this next week, correct? Thanks.
All right, moving on. Summer tax collection. Dr. Disney.
Good evening, Board. You have in your packet the annual resolution to approve the 100% summer tax collection for 2019.
Any question? Okay, item.
Values are high.
Item F, relinquish federal funds. Who's got this one? Ms. Mosher.
So you have in your packet a recommendation to relinquish our federal funds for Title III Part A immigrant students. You can see the total there is just around $279.
The problem with that is we spend way more money. We already service these kids in a different way. To go through the rigmarole that we do for the $269 is pointless. So we look for ways to save money and administrative time. This would be one.
I remember this.
We've done this every year, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And we use 31A money to support.
Item G, certified staff resignation.
Couple weeks, we'll recommend that you accept the resignation of Ms. Mindy Halligan. This is the position we filled or are requesting to fill earlier with Karina. So.
Any questions? Item H, overseas field trip, Paris.
So actually you have 2 there, but the first one is a trip to Paris with our choir. It's going to be recommended in the following weeks to approve their trip to Paris, and that has followed the guidelines as requested. It says in there, on the packet, it talks about the price per student being around $3,200.
This is totally voluntary and
Totally
they pay for it themselves.
Correct.
There's fundraising opportunities too for kids that need.
And this is until 2020, and the purpose is so that they could do fundraising now to start
So they'll have a
planning for that.
to plan for it.
Out of that group, how many would be suspected that would go on a scholarship? Do you know?
Typically, there are none that go on scholarship, because if we're this far out, we typically can fundraise enough prior. We've never had a situation with one this far out that we've had the scholarship. We've had other opportunities where it's been a quick one where we don't have the opportunity to fundraise or a scholarship.
Well, are there provisions in here then for scholarship?
We just handle those internally typically. So if they have you're saying if a family has a hardship, they would reach out to us, and then we would work through the fundraising opportunities with them, or find a donor or a scholarship.
All right, so I guess what I'm saying is the kids that are out raising the money, is there any money that they raise that would go towards scholarship funds?
Probably once they reach their $3,200 goal, if let's say they raised 4, then you can take 800 of that and put it in a scholarship fund.
Well, no, but again, I'm talking about the minimum amount that each student is supposed to pay. There's no scholarship funds in that money, is that correct?
No,
Correct.
that's correct.
Correct.
The student to adult ratio for the trip to Paris is 4-1, and the trip to Hawaii is 8-1. Is there like how do we come up with those numbers?
We go anywhere from about 4 to 10 to 1, depending on location, depending on parameters of the trip. It varies greatly in terms of that. So if we have one that's a little more difficult to manage, we might drop that number. If we have a Cedar Point day, we'll go to a 10 to 1. Where they're contained in a park, we'll go to a 10 to 1. If you're in a foreign country, we might go to a 4 to 1.
Which is, again, Dr. Chesney, the other ones, the band, I saw 6 or 8 busloads. Did you see that?
I'm going to chaperone that one.
You are kidding. Holy
Yeah.
smokes. Going to Hawaii?
Anything else on Paris?
No, let's go.
Okay,
Where they're going.
so item I didn't know that Hawaii has left the United States, but overseas field trip to
Board
Hawaii.
policy that says it has to be included because it's not continuous, so we do have another recommendation for a board approved trip to Hawaii for our band. And it's a neat experience. We saw that in there, that they'd be part of the commemorating 75th anniversary of the end of World War II, and they'll be presenting at that, so I think it's a pretty neat experience.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So it says 6 large buses. How
Well,
many
that would be
students? How many
ideally
students?
that, there could be up to that, there could be,
That's all.
I hope it's to the airport.
I'll stop it. Bill, I've been there. It's going to take 13 hours and 30 minutes. I've been there. All right. So, but anyhow, so how many students would that be?
so it's open to all the students, so I think it's like 260 students, but depending on how many choose to go, that would be through, again, the process.
Well, and if you read that, you'll see they invited us. We didn't put in for this, so our band is so well recognized that we are
It's
invited.
unbelievable. I know the choir left the church. So. That's fun working that stuff.
Okay. That closes for future action and brings us into board committee reports. Board of Ed bulletins. Any committee reports this evening?
When's our next facility meeting?
Scheduled for 2 Tuesdays from now.
What's that?
27th, is that what it is?
27th of November?
That's Tuesday, isn't it?
No, 4th of December. 4th of December.
It's got to be the first
Yeah.
Tuesday of the month.
4th of December. 5, well, we agreed to 6 o'clock.
And then also, there's currently scheduled a policy and finance meeting on Tuesday, November 20th at 6 p.m. That's according to the cadence. We can schedule it for a different time. That is according to the cadence that was previously announced. If it's inconvenient for everybody, then I think it's. I will send out a doodle poll, and we will have one more meeting before the end of the year. So it will not be on Tuesday, November 20th. I will send out a doodle.
Anything else on committee reports? All right, Board of Ed bulletins.
All right, as we know, the law passed for marijuana. So, I've got some things here which I think, if I recall, we emailed these around to one point. This is called Pop-Tarts. We got Pop-Tarts, and we got kind of what they're working on, and some things from Colorado. We talked about McDonald's, 202 franchises, and recreational marijuana, 424 franchises, and then medical marijuana, another 516. So kind of dwarfs McDonald's in Colorado. And also, in the last 4 years, the increase in THC levels, which is very important. This informational thing needs to get out to people that are going to be users of this stuff. So it's gone up by 155%, the potency of marijuana, which is one purpose in that is to addict people to it. So we look at that as a real major concern. That's the last 4 years that's been monitored. And then the bottom line is, in this thing I got, this picture with all this cash in it. Call it cash. All this is about, that's what it's all about. Lots of it. It's not a healthy cash. So in my continuing these flyers, it talks about what the problem is with our youth, and it talks about our middle school kids, our grade school kids, ages 12 to 17, 18 to 25, and the use and the increase in use after legalization. Now, with the increased potency in marijuana and its legalization, and I can tell you 100% for certain, Ed does my building stuff, my building inspector told me he looked at $40 million worth of structures in the last months to grow this stuff in. Yeah. So they're not messing around. Michigan is going to be a huge marketing center for this stuff, and it's marketed towards our youth initially. And we have gummy bears, we have brownies, we have all these other things that are going to be legal, which will be dangerous for young kids. Very dangerous. It's going to look like candy. So more things for us to deal with at the school board level, but more things for our administrators, more than us even, as parents. My youngest is 23 now. I don't think she's what the ropes are, but definitely a concern. So what I'd like to do from the board side is start to get out as much information as we can, and do this proactively, and not only administrative stuff, but information to parents, and know what to be looking for. And it's going to take a different tack. It's like one thing, as soon as you think you're caught up on one thing, you get another. And I understand the reason that folks want to legalize it 100%. Let's make it an honest business, versus an underhanded business. But the reality is the comparison models, which these are actual, these are real numbers. And it's not a positive thing. It can't be positive. I think if you look downtown Brighton, you're going to find an empty building that sits next to CNC Catering. It's called you can call it a pharmacy. It's been sitting empty for a long time. The shelves are all in it. My suggestion is that it'll be a popular house or a pot sale place. I don't know that to be certain yet. I've talked to the city council, and nobody can give me an answer on it yet, but I did ask. Because I'd like to know if we have a pot dispensary going to be right in the middle of Brighton now. And I'll share with you this. There's discussion about why they would allow it and why they wouldn't allow it. Towns and cities can opt out of certain things. They can kind of have a dry community or a dry town. But the revenue generated from it is huge. And I can tell you this for certain also, Brighton City is out of money. We work on projects with Brighton City. They're out of money. So they're looking at any source that will generate revenue. And I hope, in the wisdom of their board, they like to put as much restraint and control as legal on those operations for the benefit of our students in this community. Anybody any questions on this? But if we could, we'll get this. Should I give you, Sarah? Didn't I give you a whole package on the same? I thought we had an email. I'll give it to you. It came from our county commissioners. What you want to remember also is the county commissioners decided not to take a stand on the city. They didn't say if we're going to support or not support it. Our school board, I brought it to our school board at one point. School board didn't want to take a stand on it either. Or Amy, I don't think we ever put to a vote. We discussed it a little bit. We decide not to say, the board's going to say we don't support it or we support it. But I can tell you clearly that I don't support any of it when it has to do with youth, because I don't think there's any good that can come out of it, period. I can't see any good to a 13-year-old kid in middle school having an addiction to this stuff. Has anybody seen anything positive happen from that? So now we got to stand at the door and figure out a way to keep the stuff out of the school even more than we do already. And sorry, when I went to Scranton Middle School, it wasn't perfect. We had our problems with the same stuff, but we didn't have this. We didn't have that kind of money potential being generated from it. So the students weren't marketed. They could find it, people could find it, but it wasn't like here. It's that easy to get. One other thing. We also had a consensus, we had an agreement regarding funding Dr. Graves to talk to an attorney regarding the use of public schools in the facilities. What was the result of that, Dr. Graves?
You mean for the interview process for board candidates?
Yeah, regarding using the classroom in Brighton schools to interview candidates and picking those candidates.
Yeah.
It's legal, and what does the attorney say?
I sent you that opinion. If I can go back and think, paraphrasing, as long as they're using it to, and they invite everybody, and they have, and they're not promoting a yes vote at that particular meeting, that's where people get into trouble, is when they're advocating a yes vote on school property, or if they're printing flyers for the yes vote or something like that. So, my understanding the interview is, according to the attorney opinion, legal.
Okay, well, I would suggest that it's not legal, and here's why. Is it under conflict of interest with our own school board policies? Part of it in policy A is to earn and keep the public confidence in the school district. And it talks about guidelines which apply to all district employees, officers, agents, including members of the board, to ensure that conflicts of interest do not occur. Now, in this, I checked with reservations and using our school buildings and paying rent. If you're doing things outside of your normal school business, you're supposed to rent the buildings, you have to rent the classrooms. Now, I don't see this as being an interest of the school. I don't see using the classroom because that was the interest of our school and our community. So I asked, has anybody ever rented rooms or paid the rental fee to hold this meeting? And that answer was no.
It doesn't actually fall under board policy for that. It falls under the teacher's master agreement. And
teachers aren't in control of this district, though.
I know, but all I'm saying is there's a provision in the teacher's master agreement that allows for them to use for union business classrooms within the district.
I'm good with that. Now, selecting candidates and then endorsing the candidates and then funding the candidates is not union business within the school district. The union business would be to conduct the meetings. And now in history, unions have meeting halls outside of schools or outside of their place of business. They have places that they meet and they conduct this kind of business.
They do that now presently with contract votes. So if there's a contract vote with a TA, they have to do it off property. So this one, again, has a long history which outlives me. I have brought this concern up to the BEA, and they can make their decision moving forward, and we can make ours.
Okay. At this point, have they getting indication of what their plans are?
They've talked about deciding whether or not they're going to be on property. My guess is they're leaning towards not, but that's kind of where the last conversation I had.
Well, state law is pretty clear that it doesn't allow the use of public resources or public school buildings for anything to do with regarding an election process or advocates for any particular person. This particular process is advocating for particular people, which then would state law would apply and over to Trump any union contract or any board policy. So, and our attorney believes, though, according to state law, he looked at it.
Yep. So you've received opinions from me from Joel Gehring from MASB, Brad Banasic from MASB, and this was in a consecutive of 6 years because we've talked about this.
What about the Truman Law Firm?
The Truman Law Firm gave you the exact same opinion that MASB, both the attorneys there did.
What his opinion was, the way I read it, was because it's in the contract that allows him to do it.
Well, and I think he identified that it wasn't an advocation for a yes vote or an advocation for, at that meeting, a particular candidate, because they deliberate, in his opinion, they deliberate after the meeting and then identify who the candidate is.
It's not true. They use public school emails. They emailed the the results to the teachers who they selected during the school hours. That's not true. I have the emails. All right, so
I'm just saying, that was the attorney's opinion.
I understand, but I have the emails where it was emailed around the school to who they were selecting. So, so I think there's a process I want to keep working on there. I'd like to see that they never conduct those meetings again in our school, and that they're conducted outside of school. It has to do with selecting a candidate. And I also believe that they owe rental for the classroom that they use, because anybody that's a civilian would have to pay the rent. So that means in that particular classroom, they rent for about $100 an hour. So those are money that's due. There should have been an application process turned in to use that classroom after school, so that administration would have known they were using it. There was no application turned in, there was no form turned in, so they were using public schools without anyone's knowledge. So because we have a board policy on the use of the public schools, and we have to give permission administratively for the use of those schools, they broke board policy by using the building. There's no right that anybody can just walk in there and use these classrooms. No individual can do that. I can't do that, and nor can they. So, I'd like to know what policies they broke by using the classrooms without permission. And their union contract is good for using it for union business. So if this is the business of the union to select the candidates and then support those candidates and sponsor them, that truly is the lawbreaker.
Mr. Conley brings up a really good, interesting questions along this spectrum of illegality and conflict of interest and unethical or disingenuous or hypocritical performance of duties. And so I'd like to ask 5 specific questions of just some cases that I've witnessed and that are related to see where they fit on this spectrum. So the first one would be a board member who receives a BEA endorsement and then also significant campaign funding from the BEA, but then is in a position to negotiate with the BEA. And we can think about these for now, but these are significant instances.
Separate questions, or was that one question?
That was one question.
Okay.
Second question would be a sitting board member who uses their place of business as campaign headquarters for some, but not all, campaigning board members. That's question number 2. Question number 3 on the spectrum would be a board member who uses GoFundMe and BAS icons while seeking funding for re-election. That would be a third case. A fourth case would be a sitting board member who uses available associated real estate to actively campaign against an incumbent board member. That would be the fourth case. And the fifth case would be a city board member who takes photos of candidate board member signs, then drives up to the county clerk's office to file complaints.
What's this have to do with anything?
But it has a lot to do. We're talking about
It
the
has nothing to do
spectrum.
with breaking laws within public school buildings, and people are free to use their property as they see fit. If you pay taxes on the property, you can put whatever sign you want on it, and you don't have to do anything.
No, I'm talking about hypocrisy,
That's not just
disingenuity,
hypocrisy.
and
Oh, you are trying
being unethical,
Yeah, because
conflict of interest.
and you want to protect people that do things that are
All
illegal.
right, this
it's
conversation, I don't think we're,
I think Dr.
I
Chesney's
think we
leaving
need
on
to
a good
end,
note, and that was
at
recorded.
this point, I'm cutting
Because-
the conversation off because this is not, there's no merit and value to furthering this discussion. So, I think, Mr. Conley,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
you have made your point, and Dr. Chesney's made his point, and we're gonna move on. Does anyone else have any further, Board of Ed bulletins?
I do.
Mr. Myers?
I can guarantee will be considerably less
Okay.
controversial. You know, of course, I have children in multiple different schools in the district, and one of the great things about the community is there's tremendous support for the restaurants and the various businesses to support, PTO fundraisers or you name it, the various fundraisers throughout the district. But one of the things that struck me was I would become aware of a 20% of proceeds for a particular restaurant would be contributed to PTO, but it was yesterday, and I didn't hear about it until, the day after. So one of the things I was gonna ask Dr. Gray, is there a way that it seems to me that the groups that are taking advantage of each of these fundraisers, they're basically limited to just that particular group, the PTO at one elementary school, or if there was a way that we could have a clearinghouse, whether it's in your Friday email, where you could have just, the word gets out to all the groups in the school to say, if you're having the fundraiser, email that flyer to Dr. Gray, and then that gets included.
So we do have that process.
Pardon me?
So that process comes through our office. So any flyer that you see approved for district distribution comes through our office. And so anybody that, and I'll give you a great example, the Sky Zone event that we had last weekend, that had the I Will Right Now Foundation. So that flyer was sent to us originally. We made a couple tweaks to it because it didn't fit a couple portions of it with what we wanted to project. So it was tweaked, and we sent that out. I probably get 10 flyers a week that would like to be included in the Friday letter. And so we take a lot of time to kind of delineate where we want to put them. So if it's a Mod Pizza flyer that will do a district-wide fundraising event, we throw it out in the Friday letter. If it's something that's elementary focused itself, we give approval for it to go home in the Friday folders. If it's a multi organization for a movie night or something like that, and there's a flyer attached with the yogurt place coming up and they're going to donate 20%, we give the approval and identify where the location's going out. So we try to be very targeted in that. And the other thing we try not to do is make the Friday letter too big in terms of 10 different advertisements that might not be district related. So we try to keep that to a minimum. The other thing we try to move away from is when people start to see flyers come out in my Friday letter that are fundraisers, sometimes they read beyond that and they send me things that are profitability flyers. So we deny those, and then we have an issue because the only thing we try to put in the Friday letter is something that promotes an activity that gives back to the Brighton area schools thing. But I probably get another 5 to 7 flyers a week of businesses that just want me to promote the business. And I call and I'm like, hey, look, we don't really do that. There's some other ways that you could probably get in front of people, and then we give them options and they say, oh, okay, I didn't realize that. And so we do have a process that we do that with. If you got it the day before, they never send it to us, typically is what it is. So I could put I guess I could put a paragraph in the Friday letter and say if you have a flyer or would like something promoted that directly gives back to the Brighton area schools community, let us know, drop it off the stars, and we put them in a folder and we go through them together and we kind of go from there.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting it has to be in the Friday letter. I mean, obviously.
Or anything, yeah.
Right, I mean, that serves a very specific purpose, yeah. But it's just, to me, it seems like there's lost opportunity, where the restaurants, these businesses have been very gracious to support financially all these wonderful programs, but it seems like whether it's a PTO for one of the elementary schools, or they just don't get this, it doesn't get disseminated as broadly. And if there was a medium or a clearinghouse or some other manner in which that could get disseminated, maybe Ryan's his
Ryan has 6 followers. And 4 of them are related to him. And 4 of them are related to him. So Ryan.
So are you talking about recording one that's on Wednesday?
Well, but that was one thing.
Well, it comes out on Facebook. So I think that's the disconnect. A lot of times people just push it on Facebook and it doesn't get, this guy has no clue.
Right, well, that's my point. And it's only going to be as effective as
how
people
many
that are originating will get him or get.
Right, because you can be from Scranton and still want to go get my pizza.
I think I'd put something out, or the principal put something, maybe that. I have a PAC meeting tomorrow with all the PTA.
It just seems like there's lost opportunity. I think that they could be much more successful across the district at all levels if there was a way to have a central means of getting that information out to the people.
We do bulletin boards too. So for ones that might not directly affect, we give them an option of the bulletin board.
Dr. Chesney. I'll get you.
Some really wonderful things in the school district that I'd like to bring up. One is, I think it was not last weekend, but the weekend before, I went to go see Lion King Jr. at the BCPA. And this was put on a lot of kudos to the students and the staff and to Mr. Wilson for directing this. I think most high schools would be envious of the quality of the program that our 7th and 8th graders put together. I mean, the costumes were outstanding, the singing was outstanding. It was an excellent program and deserves to be commended. A second item that I wanted to bring up, and I think, Dr. Gray, you might have pushed this out to us, but it was a letter from the Kentwood parent of the graciousness of our athletes and our bands and our teachers and just basically the whole community of Brighton. I don't know, let me get a couple of highlights on it. I'm a Kentwood grad, teacher, mom, band mom, sports mom, etc. The sportsmanship I saw on the field from your band was appreciated. Let's see. Your football players showed tremendous class while on the field, helping our guys up, taps on the helmet in the back. I know it was a tough loss for your kids. You earned a fan today from the Kentwood family. From my seat, your district appears to be teaching your students, musicians, and athletes all the right things. Best regards, Miss Sagansky, 6th grade science teacher at Kentwood. And I just think that's something to be celebrated, is that when a teacher and parent from another school district goes out of their way to commend our community, our students, I think that's just absolutely outstanding. So.
And I've been teasing Ryan a lot tonight, but I will give Ryan a lot of credit. He does run our Rough and Rowdy. So we have put student representatives for the last 4 years in charge of our Rough and Rowdy because we felt that we needed some leadership in the front row of the football games or at the hockey games. And the kids that we've put there have done a really nice job. So I will give Ryan credit.
One more just positive note too is that just the visit, seeing Shadow come in and visit us tonight, right? It's our first, I've seen pictures of Shadow before, but just to see one of our therapy dogs come in as a 1-year-old. I guess spent half a day at Horning today, and it was the first half day in the school and just did a wonderful job, and so it's just nice to meet the dogs and to see the success of that program, so commendation.
On another positive note, I see some of our student leadership students here. We'll set up the veteran showcase, and that's today is the day if they can stand up, whoever was involved in putting the showcase.
That is Miss Leah. Who was the other student that did it with you? There were several things.
Several, yeah, but lately.
Okay.
Painted the hallways, and again, we may, maybe at the end of the meeting, Andy, we could take a moment so we kind of just look at the that is today. Thanks for doing the showcase, it turned out great.
Thank you for all of the items that we
It's my pleasure to supply those to you. It really is. And I talked to my aunt, she's 90, she's ready to come and meet you.
Oh,
So
that'd
she
be
wants
awesome.
to come over and meet you, and you can visit with one of her husbands in your case. So, but, anyhow, it's a pleasure to do it. And we have to also thank Mr. Johnson for helping with you guys for it. And Gavin's not here now, and he talked about it earlier with working on the policies, but I know he helped you organize that, and it was very, like I said, he's very heartfelt on his end, and I know he takes a lot of time to do that, so Gavin Johnson helps him. So,
Anything else this evening? All right, that moves us into our second call to the public. If anyone wishes to address the board, please step to the podium, and we request the same rules apply.
Hi, I am Sue Ellen Higgins. I live at 1058 Hillcrest. First of all, to the leadership class, I hope that you've noticed that good government is slow and inefficient and frustrating and contentious. And please remember that whenever government is not those things, we're in big trouble. Okay? Efficiency is not what we're looking for in a democratic government. We're looking for slow, contentious inefficiencies. They are our friend. To the board, I just wanted to mention with regard to that survey, specifically to curriculum, I think the elephant in the room is about the opportunity cost, and nobody actually kind of used that phraseology, but I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to put together some kind of survey that makes it clear to the respondent that, you know, if they're looking at this language, it's a commitment that takes them away from band and ROTC. If they're looking at ROTC, it's a commitment that takes them away from language and band and so forth. The most rudimentary example being just my 8th grader here, when he decided to do jazz band, he lost all his electives. And for that reason, he was really indecisive about it until the very 11th hour. And so without making that clear in the survey, you're not going to get a real good, you know what I mean? You're going to get kind of a Pollyanna kind of, oh yeah, that'd be great. But, you know, without listing that opportunity cost, we really don't have a real firm grasp on where their priorities are. And I think that's why Dr. Chesney wanted the other things in there and blending it. It's not to make them compete, but to really get a more realistic picture of whether or not kids have the commitment in this district in the large enough numbers to take away all of their electives. Because from the numbers you were giving in terms of hours, I don't think they'd have any electives left if they did ROTC. That would be the whole bag of wax, all of wax. And Dr. Chesney and Mr. Connolly, thank you very much. We will miss you.
Thank you. And good feedback on the
Hi, Kara Sotero, 4095 Dominion Boulevard. I would like to offer a different point of view about the code of conduct discussion. I've had a student at the high school in every type of those clubs, whether it's curricular, athletics, or a service or competitive club. So when you're talking about fair and balanced for what the students are doing, I think we also have to think about what's fair and balanced about the clubs and how the district supports them. So athletics are supported with money for their coaches that are paid. The clubs have volunteer or some paid, some a little bit here and there. Not that the volunteers are any less qualified, but they aren't paid. The clubs are funded, some by the PTO, some by the parents, some both. There is no transportation option at all for any of these clubs. The Science Olympiad team has gone across the state. Parents are driving. Doesn't matter if it's the Bob UN in another couple of towns over, same thing. There is no option where you might have to pay for it for the soccer team, but you're given the option. Uniforms are provided, whereas in clubs, your kids are buying their t-shirts or whatever else they might need. So maybe the students who receive more funds from the district should be held to a higher standard, or maybe all the clubs should be funded by the district. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brooke Warren. I live on 9192 Oregon Drive, Brighton, Michigan, 48114. I just wanted to address the whole topic of the clubs as well. I'm senior class president at Brighton High School, but along with that, I'm involved in 4 different clubs outside of school. I'm the president of Soul for Youth Outreach. We meet on Tuesday mornings at 7 a.m. We are a student-led club, so we have a sponsor who's a teacher, and she helps us when we need. But for the most part, I run attendance. I have a board of 4 other people, and if they don't meet my expectations of what I think a board member should be doing, then I would cut them. I'm also secretary of Brighton High School Red Cross Club. We are run by the National Red Cross Club for America, and we followed their standards and their requirements. So last year, a student wasn't reaching what we were expecting, so we did cut her. She was a board member that had been on with us for 2 years. So I don't think it's correct to apply rules to every club, because I think that gives the students a big opportunity to take that upon themselves. And I mean, we kind of grade each other in that respect. I was also involved in BITE, Brighton Initiation to Teach Everyone, last year. I tutored on Tuesdays after school. I picked my days that I wanted to tutor, and if I missed or I skipped, that was on me. I felt bad for my little kid that I tutored, because then he would be like, where's Brooke? So I think we don't really have to worry about that group of kids because it is service projects. We don't have to do those types of things, but we do them because we want to and because we have a heart for kids, or we have a heart for blood drives, or we have a heart for Bible studies, or whatever it is. And I don't think putting regulations and rules on them would be good for anybody, especially those kids that are super passionate about the things that they're involved in. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ryan Kane. I live on 7653 Sayers Point Drive. I would like to talk about the club rules as well. I was not always that good of a student. Actually, sophomore year, I got suspended for drinking at Winterfest. And it was not the sitting out of lacrosse that made me reconsider the way I was doing things. It was actually the words that Mr. Johnson spoke to me. He, once I was done with my suspension, he had me come into his office and he talked to me a lot about what I was doing wrong and how I needed to improve. And I was there for me. And then 3 weeks later, he called me into his office again to see how things were going for me, see if I needed any help or anything. And I would just put all the trust in him. I think he knows what's truly best for the students and how to work with them. Thank you.
I remember a couple weeks ago, I think it was Mr. Chesney who made the assertion that we should try to limit certain sections of the meetings to a certain time because, you know, the bureaucracy just sets in and it gets pretty terrible. And I mean, like, I'm not against wholehearted debates about the Constitution at a school board level in a small town in the middle of southern Michigan, but I don't really like the fear-mongering stories about Pop-Tarts that much, and the empty warehouse downtown. I don't know how that's productive until it is a weed shop that is selling to certain students that are at risk. I don't see how that's productive at the current moment. I mean, I can understand the precautions taken to, you know, look in a health curriculum to implement certain things against weed, but nothing's happened yet to, you know, really assert that, you know, white building downtown is the weed factory that's going to get our students. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone else wish to address the board this evening?
Good evening. My name is John Conley. I'm a Brighton resident. And soon I'll be back in this position, a few more meetings. And this is where I started, I don't know if it was 16 years ago, but not a long time. As it goes, sometimes we need to look at what we believe as adults would be best suited to help our youth. And sometimes that's not what youth thinks. And I was there once. I recall I didn't think my parents knew anything. I didn't think the people in my community knew anything. And a short time later, I realized really how much they knew. I lost my dad last year, and he and I would meet daily and do projects in the shop and get machine parts. And he'd say, you know, maybe you better listen to me about how to machine this part this way so you'll know what you're doing when I'm gone. I said, you'll never go. And so now, those skills are gone. So I would just suggest, as we move forward in these times of trying to keep a strong school, every day our administration works to keep a safe school. Every single day. Every minute, every waking hour, they're there. And as a school board, I'd expect from the school board that they support administration and bring as much knowledge from the community as they can to the administration to help them do that on behalf of your children that are in our school. Because the only reason we're all here today is to have a better school. There's nobody here today, including in the audience, that's not interested in making Brighton schools, and every other school for that matter, a better place. So if we make judgments and we pass judgment on others and their opinions and different things, maybe we should listen sometimes, and maybe we'll just get a little something. Somebody may give you 10 ideas, And out of those 10 ideas, you may leave with one. And when you leave with that one might be the one that saves you. So I'll suggest that everybody here has something to offer, different reasons, whatever it is. My reasons for being here for this many years were clear. Entered into a school system that was totally dilapidated. And I love my school, and I still love it. I graduated from here, my mother graduated from here. This building, this room we're sitting in was our library. Downstairs was a cafeteria. I walked by our principal's office. My principal was Bob Scratton. So we think about why we're here. And like I said, as I finish up, I'm not giving up on our school. I'll be in the outside doing it. But here tonight, I saw a lot of good things, and I saw some things that maybe didn't need to happen. But that I think someone said tonight, the system kind of works on that, and actually heard a thank you, and I was proud to hear that. So a lot of times we don't get a thank you doing this job. The thank you is seeing our students be successful, and that doesn't come always with a pat on the back. It's just seeing them be successful. So that's what I have tonight. Thank you.
All right, that'll close second call to the public. If we could do a moment of silence, we should have done it at the beginning of the meeting, and I was remiss on that, for our veterans who have served and continue to serve, and those that have lost protecting this nation. Thank you. All right, our next meeting is Monday, November 26, 2018, and this meeting is adjourned.